Well, 4 years after the announcement, CAA is now a reality. Immediately after the announcement came in from the Ministry of Home Affairs, we saw protests breaking out. Remember, CAA has been a contentious and high-stakes topic, especially ahead of the elections. To speak to us more about what it would mean, former Solicitor General of India, Harish Salve, joins us on the broadcast. Thank you for joining us and thank you for speaking to Times Now. Mr. Salve, the CAA rules have been notified, but we are still witnessing commentary on how this law is exclusionary and also discriminatory, reducing Muslims to second-class citizens. This is what several protesters, several opposition leaders have been saying. How would you respond to this?
Muslims of which country? I mean, come on. This is not anti-Muslim. The logic of the act is so clear. If we say anybody from Pakistan who's unhappy wants to shift to India, you know, we will no longer be two nations. Today's stage, every Pakistani will want to move here. So, one has to just see the absurdity of the suggestion. Today, those are countries where there is those are theocratical countries. It's the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Everybody knows in Afghanistan you have the Taliban. Even Bangladesh is an Islamic Republic. So those are countries where minorities' rights are not recognized. In countries where minorities' rights are not recognized, we are saying Indian origin minorities can come back to India and we will give them citizenship. Where is the question of discrimination in this? It's an absurd suggestion.
Okay. In fact, the criticism is also that the CAA does not include Ahmadiyyas and in its ambit, and they are Muslims but not recognized as Muslims in Pakistan, and therefore the CAA should also have included them. That's also one of the arguments that has been made. And because it doesn't, they say that it is unconstitutional. So, Mr. Salve, how do you respond to the argument that this is not just discriminatory but also unconstitutional?
So, the Indian constitution says we must go hunting all over the world and find wherever. It also doesn't have a lot of persecuted communities from Eastern Europe. You know the problems. Tomorrow somebody may say the Chinese don't treat people from Mongolia or those parts. You know the problem that you have with the Chinese. You must allow all of them also to come in, and of course the Rohingyas must come in. And you know, in Africa, there are tribes which are at war, and some tribes are treated unfairly. All those tribes must come in. So if you have to accommodate one group, i.e., Indian people of Indian origin, who follow the faith, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, etc., in our neighboring countries, if you have to accommodate them, you must go and find out if somebody in North Pole is being treated badly and allow him in. I mean, if that's their understanding of the Constitution, maybe I don't know constitutional law or vice versa.
Okay. Mr. Salve, in fact, a large source of the confusion that also took place during the protests that had broken out in 2019-2020 was a conflation of the CAA with the NRC. The government said that at a national level, NRC was never discussed at the government level. But do you believe that this conflation was a mistake and should have been avoided in the first place because that's what led to these widespread protests across the country?
The entire protest was, I'm sorry to say, a nonsense. And that has now been proved. I have heard interviews by people I don't want to name who said, we have seen the draft rules. You know what the draft rules say? The draft rules say every Indian, every Muslim Indian will have to prove he's a citizen, otherwise he'll be kicked out. The government says, we have no such draft rule. They said, no, we are telling you we've seen the draft rules. I remember this discussion on TV. So, I mean, if you want to say something, you can say, oh, this is only chapter 1, chapter 2 will come, chapter 4 will come. And actually, you know what? Somebody is going to scrap the Constitution of India. So you can go on conjuring up. In any case, it is that time of 5 years where people come up with stories. So you'll hear more and more exciting stories.
Okay, so you're saying it's nothing but propaganda. But Mr. Salve, we've gone through the draft rules and the rules for those who are eligible. And it's a very, very elaborate process that they need to follow to get the citizenship. They need to submit their application with several documents to a district committee, and then a special empowered committee scrutinizes their claims. It's a very elaborate process. If you can just take us through the details of that.
And there's good reason for that. You do realize in our neighborhood, there are a lot of people whom we don't want walking into India under the umbrella of this protective legislation. So there has to be a rigorous scrutiny. It is not that you have to prove that I am a Christian who was treated badly. You have to prove you belong to the community to whom the ameliorative measures are being extended. And that has to be. Today, people whom we don't want, and you know whom I'm referring to, not just a community. Today, people we don't want, people who have questionable records, walking into India and saying, oh, I am so-and-so because look at my passport. They create a passport showing a different name and they come in. And then you have your terrorist police chasing them all over the country. So you have to be very careful when dealing with countries where especially Pakistan and Afghanistan, where there is a possibility of leakage.
Okay, Mr. Salve, in fact, the CAA was also passed by the Parliament in December 2019, but it's taken 4 years and 3 months to be precise for the government to notify the rules. So is there merit to the argument about a political motive to the timing in the build-up to the election season? Why would it take this long for the government to make it a reality?
Yeah, there are 2 points of view. One is, why have they done it in a hurry? The other is, why have they taken so long? In this, the government can never win. if they do it, they'll say, see what tearing hurry. If they don't do it, they say, oh, why are you procrastinating? These are matters of seriousness. As you rightly said, somebody has to very carefully calibrate how the rules must work. On the one hand, the rules should not become a complete deterrent to people for whom the law is targeted. On the other hand, you cannot open a floodgate of allowing people to walk in. So these things take time. And I don't think there's anything great. The government had made the law. I mean, they had the political argument anyway.
Okay, but there is another criticism, which is really the center of the criticism around it, that the CAA makes religion a basis for granting citizenship, and therefore it falls foul of Article 15, which relates to the prohibition from any discrimination. So how would you respond to that? Because amid the massive protests, one of the key points is that it discriminates based on religion, and it's unconstitutional.
Will you read Article 15? 15 says, no person in India shall be discriminated against. No Indian citizen can be discriminated against. These are foreigners. Today, if a Chinese person applies for a visa and is denied a visa, can you go to court saying, why are you denying it to me? Are you denying it to Americans? Discrimination. Discrimination applies to those who are subject to your law. People who are not citizens of India have no right to be citizens of India. Citizenship of a country by birth is different. Citizenship of a country by naturalization, when you migrate, is quite another matter. And that has always been considered an act of grace by a country. So if India is saying, I will allow so-and-so to become a citizen, the fact that other Pakistanis feel discriminated against doesn't violate Indian constitution.
Okay, all right. Mr. Salve, finally, there's also a concern about the impact of the CAA on demography, particularly the northeastern states. So do you believe that the extension of the 6th schedule protects these areas from demographic change? Because that's one of the concerns that has been mentioned.
See, demographic change is one of the reasons why the governments have to work these things slowly. On the one hand, you say, why did it take so long? On the other hand, if they have worked all this through, then you say, why have they done it? So these are all matters which the government will have to deal with the details. It's a value choice, ultimately. There are Sikhs in Afghanistan. We know Sikhs were, I think, the third most important community in Afghanistan. There are Sikhs in Pakistan. There are some very valuable gurdwaras which we know are in Pakistan. Before 1947, there was no Pakistan. It was all a part of the Indian subcontinent. So these are people of the same ethnicity as us. And if they are being in an Islamic republic, we didn't make Pakistan an Islamic republic. We didn't make Afghanistan an Islamic republic. If those people have created, the people of the majority of that country have created an Islamic republic where non-followers of the Islamic faith are given treatment below that of those who follow the Islamic faith. And India says, okay, you're of our ethnicity, we open our doors. What's all this fuss about?
Okay, all right. So it's just politics and propaganda. That's what you're saying. Mr. Harish Salve, thank you so much for joining us with a legal perspective on how that's going to play out.